Well, folks, good afternoon. February 2nd, 2022. It is National Signing Day, although, as Kirk Ferentz brought out during his weekly press conference here just, about an hour ago, the importance of this day has been diminished by the early signing period in December. Nevertheless, Iowa got good news today when three-star cornerback Deshaun Lee made it official and signed his national letter of intent. So congratulations to Deshaun. I don't know where this show is going to go, folks. I have no idea where people are going to take this thing. Our phone line is open, 515-635-1601. There was a lot in that Kirk Ferentz press conference earlier this afternoon. I know people are going to have opinions. That's fine. You can voice your opinions. I do want to share a couple of the clips from Kirk's press conference this afternoon with you. Even if you did see it, I want to point out a couple specific questions that were asked that I actually thought were very good questions. But our line is open. If you want to call in and give your viewpoint, you're welcome to do that. Our chat is open as well. 515-635-1601. 515-635-1601. We start with the big news of the day, and this is what we should be focusing on. Iowa signing three-star cornerback Deshaun Lee. If you missed our interview with Deshaun, be sure to watch that video following the conclusion of this broadcast. It's right here on this channel from the Hawkeye of the Storm. So Deshaun Lee out of Belleville, Michigan, 5'11", about $175. He's a corner, of course, class of 22. He's going to provide more depth. Iowa did very well in this class at defensive back. You think of Cohen and Tringer. You think of TJ Hall, Xavier Wampa, Orlando Trader. And then, of course, they get Riley Moss back for an extra year. You get Kayvon Merriweather back. You get a couple guys who are young and up-and-comers in Quinn Schulte and Sebastian Castro. You have Brendan Diaz-Fernandez coming back as well. Terry Roberts, Jamari Harris. They are deep at that position group. Now, maybe they won't. Maybe we'll see on the field this spring that they're not as deep as maybe we thought. I don't think that's going to be the case, and here's why. You've got TJ Hall and Xavier Wampa not only coming in with a lot of fanfare, they're also coming in as early enrollees, so they will be on the field this spring. Kirk Ferentz brought out during his press conference today that we saw the results of early enrolling players, specifically last year with Arlen Bruce, Keegan Johnson, and Connor Colby. All three of those guys enroll early. All three of those guys end the year as starters on Iowa's offense. So certainly getting here early helps. Of course, a couple other guys enrolling early as well, including a kicker, Brian Allen Jr., defensive lineman, 4-star out of, I believe, Connecticut, is also enrolling early. So we'll get back to Deshaun here in a second. Let's get to our first phone call. Thank you for calling from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Who's on the line?
This is Alex. What does Deshaun Lee bring to Iowa?
I think Deshaun Lee brings athleticism. I mean, to sum it up, and you watch his tape, Alex, and you're going to see a guy who has got really good hands. He played, obviously, a lot of receiver in high school. In fact, he didn't play defense until later on in his high school career. So he is going to be a ball hawk for Iowa. He's going to be able to help Iowa's reputation of takeaways. Certainly, his coverage skills are probably going to have to be honed in. I'm no defensive back expert. That's why he's coming to play for Phil Parker. But his athleticism really pops off the tape, and his hands pop off the tape. And that's going to give him an opportunity. Of course, he's not enrolling early, but it will give him an opportunity. We've seen young guys play at that position under Phil Parker. So he'll have an opportunity, especially with the attrition that Iowa endures with injuries at cornerback every year.
Are we going to get anyone in the transfer portal?
Well, not yet. I mean, they've obviously extended some offers. Hunter Norzad, the offensive tackle from Cornell, he is, I believe, going to be making a decision here soon. I want to say, I'd have to look back at my notes. I believe he's visiting this weekend. That's a great question. I'm glad you brought that up. I believe he visits this weekend. But he had Iowa in his top 5. Steven Stylianos, tight end from Lafayette, was also offered, which was a bit surprising to me that Iowa would be targeting tight end. Nate Pete from Stanford, running back, picked Mizzou over Iowa. So good question. They're trying to hit the portal, but so far they're the only Big Ten school that has not gotten a commitment from the portal. So I would anticipate somebody, but we'll just have to wait and see who that is.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
I
Alex.
like about
Appreciate the
class.
call. And yeah, the transfer portal is going to be a work in progress. And certainly after spring, you're going to have more players enter the portal. Kirk Ferentz made a point of bringing this out today that Iowa has had a very low number of players leaving. I believe 5. And I just reciting these from memory. Of course, Deuce Hogan left for Kentucky. Tyrone Tracy heads to Purdue. Desmond Hudson heads to UNI. Josiah Meeman, he left for Florida International. And was it Quavon Matthews? I don't know that Quavon's picked a school, but I believe he's in the portal. I think that's the 5th one. So, yeah, Iowa's done a good job retaining players. They are losing Dane Belton, who had eligibility remaining. They're losing Tyler Linderbaum. They're losing Tyler Goodson. All 3 of those guys had eligibility remaining. And it's interesting how Kirk phrased that today during his press conference. That's true. Those are the only guys that technically had your 4 to 5 year eligibility, or 5 years to play 4, right? Of eligibility remaining. But Kerner could have returned. He decided to leave. Kyler Schott could have returned. I don't know that Iowa offered him another year. I think that was kind of a mutual thing, is my understanding. But regardless, they're losing some, but they're certainly going to have to. They're going to have to figure out a way to use this portal, folks. We keep saying it over and over again. Whether they use it much this year, the portal has just exploded, whether you like it or not. And I know Kirk Ferentz talked today about his concerns with college football and where it's heading. I mean, he's just signed a contract through 29, so you've got to be able to utilize the transfer portal. I know we've talked about that at length. So I think they will. I don't know if Steven Stilianos will pick the Hawks. I know Syracuse wants him, and he plays out in that area. Lafayette's not far. I don't know how far it is from Syracuse. And there are some other schools in on him as well. Hunter Norzad's wanted by, Virginia Tech, Penn State, Illinois, and there's one other besides Iowa that slips my mind. But these are high major guys. Norzad will come in here. If he ends up transferring to Iowa, Norzad, I would anticipate, would end up being Iowa's starting tackle. I just would be very surprised. Now, we saw a couple of years ago, Coy Cronk transfers in after being a 4-year starter for Indiana, and it never clicked here. He dealt with injuries, but let's be honest, he kind of lost the job to Jack Plum, who struggled this year. It was just sort of an odd. You don't see that often, and Coy Cronk is never brought up as far as transfers that were successful here. And I hate to say that because, man, the guy was a long-term veteran in the Big Ten with Indiana, and he comes here and you expect him to just pick up where Tristan Wirfs left off to a degree, and just never happened. He ends up passing on an extra year. I was surprised by that. Did Iowa not offer him to come back for an extra year? That was surprising to me. But there were a number of guys that chose not to come back that surprised me at the time. But Iowa, again, Deshaun Lee today, 5'11", 175, athleticism, good hands. That's what we talked about during our interview with him. And again, it's right here on this channel if you want to watch that interview. And he's just a very, very nice kid and a very high character. Seems like the class in general, the kids that I've talked to, Caden Crawford, Aaron Graves, Addison Estring, all these guys, very high quality. TJ Hall, another one, very high character guys. And certainly you're going to get that with Iowa recruiting classes. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Erica, good to see you on here this afternoon. The Real Hayden wants to talk quarterback, but I get ripped when I bring up quarterback, the Real Hayden. So, Robert, we need a quarterback, calling Captain Kirk and over. Yep, little Star Trek style. Yeah, I have no problem with that discussion. Do I get tired of talking about quarterback? I mean, I'm a human. I get tired of talking about it because it seems like we talk about it every week. And then I get ripped for bringing it up because somebody asks me a question or sends me an email or a direct message on Twitter and asks me to ask Don Patterson a question, and then I get ripped for it. So I'll talk about anything, but man, I see this is the topic that people want to discuss. Ethan, what do you think is the reasoning for why they're not finding a quarterback in the portal? They say they're scared others are going to transfer, but who cares if they can't produce? And Ethan, I don't know that I didn't hear Kirk say that today as far as they're scared that Petrus or Padilla will leave. Perfect example of this, folks. So we all know the rumors. If you follow college football at all, we all know the rumors that Caleb Williams was headed to Wisconsin. Now, that didn't happen. He ends up being reunited with Lincoln Riley at USC. But we're all hearing those rumors that 5-star phenom Caleb Williams was headed to play for the Badgers, a place where they don't have a great record of grooming quarterbacks to be NFL products, besides Russell Wilson. And yet it sounds like, from the reports that were out there, it sounds like Wisconsin was maybe in the top 2. So perhaps they finished runner up to for the lottery for Caleb Williams. Maybe Oklahoma was in on there as well. LSU, I know, was in the mix. But my point on this is, you can argue Graham Mertz was not great. The numbers would say Graham Mertz was still better than Iowa's quarterbacks that played this past year. So the numbers would say that Mertz was actually better than Petrus and Padilla. Okay. Now you can make excuses if it's the line, whatever. That's what the numbers say. And of course, Mertz was a 5-star kid. Iowa offered him, recruited him. He ends up going to Wisconsin. He has not entered the portal. Okay. So Wisconsin went after Caleb Williams, swung and missed. But if I'm a Wisconsin fan right now, I'm looking at Paul Chryst and saying, attaboy. That's what I'm saying to Paul Chryst, because he went out there and wasn't afraid that, if we go after Caleb Williams and that gets leaked, we're going to lose Mertz. Like, that's not how you operate. So he went out there, went after Williams, missed. Mertz has not left the program. My anticipation is that Mertz is a starter next year. Now, maybe he won't be. Maybe something else will happen. Maybe they'll get somebody else and he'll leave. That's possible. And had Caleb Williams went there, certainly I would have anticipated Mertz would have entered the portal. And that's just speculation, but that would be my guess. But say Iowa went after a Caleb Williams, and you may laugh at that and say Iowa would never have a chance. I don't think many people thought Wisconsin would have a chance, and it's clear they did. I know there were other circumstances with their incoming, I believe their quarterbacks, was it their quarterbacks coach or their, I have to look back, I think their offensive coordinator, right, was a family friend of Caleb Williams. So I know there were other circumstances there, but my point is, what do you have to lose by going after a big name? Ethan, I completely agree with you. You can't be afraid of losing guys that aren't performing well enough for you at present. That's just a ridiculous line of reasoning. I totally agree with you. And thank you for this, Real Hayden. Yes, it was a great interview, not because of me. Deshaun, just a really nice young man. And if you haven't already listened to that interview, check it out. We released it yesterday as part of my weekly podcast. Robert says, let's get deep at quarterback. Hair trigger. I think we just need to face the fact that the coaching staff is fine with the quarterback situation. Here it is, folks. The winner of our daily bingo contest here on from the Hawkeye of the Storm show is awarded to Hair Trigger 83. That's exactly what I took away from the press conference today with Kirk Ferentz. They are happy with, I shouldn't say happy. They are content with the personnel they have at quarterback. And maybe they'll prove all of us wrong. But that is exactly what I heard today. I heard a quarterback, or I heard a coach that is comfortable with where Iowa is at that position. And you may disagree with it. I'm certainly not saying I agree with it. But the bottom line is there is no concern right now, at least from my vantage point. There's no concern with Iowa at quarterback. And again, I'm speaking from a Kirk Ferentz perspective, not from my perspective. I have concern. I've got concerns at that position. And I've had those concerns for quite some time. Jake the Smoke, he says, it's embarrassing watching Petrus at quarterback. I was just so overwhelmingly disappointed with his play this year. I can understand. Earl Hayden says, I came to a conclusion a while ago which is why I will not be financially supporting or attending any game this fall. I cannot watch another game of whatever you call that quarterback play. And again, you all have a right to your opinion, and I understand it. The offensive line was not good. Quarterback play wasn't good. The offense wasn't good anywhere. The running game was not good. I don't care what they look like against Kentucky. The running game was not good this year, and it hasn't been consistently good since Kirk Ferentz was here. I mean, it was good, in 2002. I mean, that stretch there after 2002, they were running the ball okay. 2015, I'd have to look back at the averages, but this is not there's a reason why Iowa has not produced marquee NFL running backs like Wisconsin has, because they just haven't had them. And certainly that's just one factor. Line play is another factor. This is a good question, Chad. What are your 5 projected starters on the offensive line? This will be a conversation that we'll certainly have with Mark Rogers in the coming weeks, but I have no problem talking about it now. Just spitballing this, I have not projected forward, Chad. This is just my initial thinking on this. I would have to say Matt Fagan is probably the presumed starter at center. I did hear today in the press conference that he has been awarded a scholarship by Kirk Ferentz and his staff, which is good news for Matt. Happy for him. He was on the 2 deep most of the year. Could have Michael Myslinski or someone else that came in during that really good 21 recruiting class up front. Could somebody else step in and potentially fill a need there? That's possible. But I would say Fagan's my starter at center. I would have to think Cody Ince and, I don't know what they'll do with Colby. Colby's going to be a starter. I have a hard time I have a hard time seeing him not be a starter. Will he stay at guard? That's a question. But I would like to think it's Fagan, Colby, Ince. I would like to think Britt, and how many is that? 4? Potentially Norzad if you can get him. If not, then you're going to have to go with probably either DeYoung or Plum, unless somebody else emerges like David Davidkov. So I guess I'm looking at that and thinking, well, maybe Connor Colby. Are they comfortable with him at guard? Is he? I'm assuming they are. Does he project more? Could he play tackle potentially? And they need help at tackle, and that's why Norzad is the biggest recruit that Iowa's still after right now. That's going to be the big storyline, much more important than Steven Stylianos. Hunter Norzad would be a huge get for Iowa in this class. They need him, and if they don't get him, then I don't know what else is out there at that position. Certainly, he's waited to make it. A lot of guys are announcing and have announced. He has waited. He's taken his time. Certainly, he's got other good offers, but he would certainly help. So, yeah, I would go from the left to right, just guessing at this point because we haven't seen spring ball. Connor Colby potentially at left tackle. Cody Ince at left guard. Fagan at center. Justin Britt at right guard. And then take your pick at right tackle. Is it Norzad if he commits? Great. Is it Plum? Is it DeYoung? That one, I just don't know. I'm not confident about either of the tackle positions. I know Mason Richmond is also in the conversation. I didn't think Mason Richmond played very well last year. And I think he will be in the conversation, but I think they really like Connor Colby. And so maybe Richmond slides over to the right. Maybe they keep him at left. It's going to be a fascinating battle this spring. But there's certainly a number of guys who have game experience. I mean, even without Norzad, that's a ton of guys who played this past fall. They just got to get better. I think that's kind of stating the obvious. They just got to get better. Reese, hopefully I'm pronouncing your name right. Labus hopefully will compete. Petrus has a big arm and a charismatic personality. Probably makes great throws in practice. Doesn't matter if you can't make the throws in game. I agree. I agree. I think he's a very smart young man. I think he's a very charismatic young man. He seems like a very generous person. I've heard people make the statement, if I had a daughter, he's the kind of kid I'd want my daughter to marry. I have no problem with that statement. I mean, I don't have a daughter myself, but my point is, he seems like a very nice young man, and he stuck it out. He's been criticized. He's talked about it. His mom having to deal with hearing her son trashed. I get it. That's frustrating. Now, I also see the other side of that. Just don't go on social media. If you're Mrs. Petrus, why are you on social media looking at this stuff? Just don't look at it. And maybe that's easier said than done, but I certainly would not if I was in that position. There's just no need. There's always going to be people who are nasty, and I try not to get nasty. I try to give fair criticism. I'm not going to sit here and say Spencer Petrus is a great young man. He deserves the starting role if I don't believe he's performing well enough. I agree with you. I hope Labus will compete. I hope all 3 guys compete, and I hope they give Carson May a chance in the fall. Do I think Carson May has a great chance of starting this fall? Absolutely not. If he had been enrolling early, perhaps a different discussion. I'm honestly a little surprised. Now, again, maybe from an education standpoint, academically, Carson may not have been ready to enroll early because, man, you'd think that if they could get him on campus this spring, it would really help competition. But the fact of the matter is he won't be getting here till at least summer. So you've got those 3 guys competing. And yes, I haven't seen Labus much. Hopefully we'll see him a lot more this spring. LH, do you think that this player discrimination suit will affect Coach Ferentz's future? Do I think the lawsuit will affect his future? Well, my understanding is he's no longer named in the lawsuit. I believe Brian Ferentz is, if I recall. I think Kirk Ferentz has probably taken most of that hit already, LH. I think he's probably, given what happened in 2020, certainly the reports that were circulating early January just last month, actually, it certainly didn't help the narrative around Iowa football. Whether you say that it was blown out of proportion, which I think to a degree it was. I think we can all agree that probably some of the reporting that was done last month was a bit over the top and a bit misleading at times. We're arguing about semantics and what does dissolved mean? He dissolved the committee. Does that mean he abolished it? Does that mean he's just restructuring? He's stated many times now he's restructuring. I think the fact that Kirk used the word dissolve in that email that was released is probably not the best choice of words. But let me just tell you something. The Iowa media, whoever is reporting on this, has to do more digging than looking at one word and generalizing an article and summing it up without actually being forthright about the details of said email. That's how I look at it. I think the media has a responsibility, and it did not help. But in answer to your question, that did not help. The optics of that were not good. I tweeted that as soon as the article came out from the Gazette. If you think the article's total baloney, that's fine. You can feel that way. And I'm not saying I'm not putting my mark for or against the reports that were out there about this was a bad look for Kirk Ferentz. I'm saying it's bad optics from a national perspective. This was on ESPN.com. This was a headline on ESPN.com when it happened. Right or wrong, it doesn't help. Do I think it's going to affect his long-term future? No, I don't. I think he's going to be here as long as he wants to be here. That's just the bottom line. I think Brian has hurt his long-term future. I don't see any way he can be the next head coach here. I mean, regardless of how he's performing. I don't think he's performing. I mean, we know he's not performing well. This offense is bad right now. But I don't even think with a good offense, unless it was just absolutely stellar, he's going to be able to overcome the accusations that were thrown specifically on Brian Ferentz, right? I think that's going to be hard for him to overcome. Whether you agree with him or not, or you think people are embellishing things, that's your opinion. But I don't think Brian Ferentz will be the next head coach here. I don't really know many people that want him to be the next head coach here. But as far as Kirk is concerned, he'll be here until he decides to leave. Okay, the real Hayden says the Iowa staff has made zero attempt to change for the better on offense. Ferentz said today he's betting on us. Well, I'm not betting on us. If nothing changes, nothing changes. I understand where you're coming from, the real Hayden. And I do want to address something. I'm going to play a little clip from Kirk Ferentz's from his press conference today. All right. This is from Kirk Ferentz earlier today. He was asked specifically about offensive scheme changes. Here's what he said.
People say, maybe even people in the media that say maybe a scheme change might be in order or something, some kind of like little reboot with the offense. Do you think that that's necessary?
I guess my answer would be we're, third in wins since 15. I mentioned 15. Last 4 years, we're second in wins in the conference. That's the ultimate goal for us. And it's not all about winning, but obviously when we line up and play on Saturdays, that's what we're trying to do, no matter who we're playing, where it is. So, and you do get evaluated on that. I know it's a little bit more detailed now in the sophisticated world of evaluation, but for me, that's what I'm fixated on. And, if they got the ball 40 minutes and we got it 20 and we win, I'm happy we won. I'm not happy about the way we win. Like, I'd rather have the ball 40, but ultimately it's finding a way to win. And I can kind of identify with what San Francisco did the two Saturdays ago, block kick and a block, field goal and then the punt. So maybe they didn't deserve the win, but they were playing last Sunday and the other team wasn't. So to me, that's what it's about. And, and then we'll work through the things that are challenges, just like we've done every year. We've had challenges, and, that's what the game's all about.
All right. So I want to address a couple things from that statement. So I want to give Kirk Ferentz credit. He did acknowledge that they need to address things offensively. I mean, if you can't acknowledge that, what are we looking at? My problem with what Kirk had to say today, and this is maybe I'm nitpicking at this, and I tweeted out about this after or during the press conference. And this is my tweet. I said, if it goes without saying that Iowa football and football in general is a 3-in-1 team sport, right? There are 3 units making up one team. Although Iowa has one of the higher win percentages in the country over the past 6 years, there will always be a ceiling on success if each unit is not evaluated individually. Individually. So when the question is about improving the offense, I don't want to hear about how high the win percentage is or was over the past 6 years. That is not an evaluation of your offense, okay? That's an evaluation of your team in general. We're talking about how we can improve the offense. And my issue with looking at it from that vantage point, and hopefully that's just coach speak. Hopefully that's just Kirk getting a bit defensive, and that's just coach speak. My problem with that statement is you are automatically placing a ceiling on your success, if indeed that's how you feel. If you feel that, well, we've won such and such a number of games, and that's how we're evaluated. Because that's not how we should be looking at this. We should be evaluating how's the defense performing? How's the offense performing? How's special teams performing? And if one is suffering, you do what Ohio State did. You make changes. Ohio State had one loss this year to a good Oregon team when they fired their DC. Okay? It is not, I'm not saying you fire Brian Ferentz. I'm not saying that. Now, I know a lot of people want him fired. That's not happening. I'm just saying I have a problem when you answer a question about improving the offense and potentially changing the offensive scheme. I have a problem when you answer it by saying, well, we have the highest win percentage or one of the highest win percentages in the country over the past 6 years. That's not the question. I hope people understand where I'm coming from with this. And I'm not trying to pick on Kirk Ferentz because he said a lot of good things today during this press conference. But I did find that interesting. And the real Hayden, I know you were frustrated by a couple of the things Kirk said today as well. You got to take everything coaches say in front of those podiums with a grain of salt. That was my one complaint about that statement from Kirk. Ethan, just wondering, do you know about Ty Thompson, the Oregon quarterback? I've actually talked to and told me Iowa was in his top 3, has lots of family in Iowa. He may transfer next year. I don't know. You probably know more about him than I do, Ethan. Obviously Iowa is going to be, if Spencer Petras, and I know a lot of fans cringe at hearing this, but Spencer Petras has an opportunity to exercise an extra year and come back for 2023. People don't like hearing that, and maybe that won't happen. I would guess it won't. It could. I would guess it won't. But if that were to happen and Padilla somehow sticks it out, I think that's unlikely, but if you were to do that, you're looking at Padilla, Petras, May, Linez. They wouldn't have a spot for a guy like Ty Thompson. And certainly using the portal is something that should be looked at as more than just filling spots. But it's an interesting question. I'll do some digging on Ty Thompson, Ethan. I appreciate you bringing that out. Didn't hear it. I don't know what class he would have been in, so I'll have to look that up. But I've had other people bring him up in the past. My big thing on quarterback, and the reason I was pining for Iowa to go to the portal at that position this year is because they need help this year. I actually like what Marco Linez has shown on film for 2023, and I have to think Carson May has got a chance to be really good. He's a 4-star quarterback by most pundits. So my big thing is neither of those guys are going to make an impact this fall. It's just not going to happen. So they need help now. But if quarterback development continues to struggle at Iowa, which it has over a long period of time, then you need to look elsewhere. Appreciate you being here, Hawkeye Howard. You've been we've missed you, buddy. It's good to see you here this afternoon. Jake the Snake, what's the word on Casper? The word on Casper is the offers continue to roll in. Duke offered recently. Miami has now gotten in on him. He's going to be able to go anywhere he wants. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what Proctor does, what Casper does, what Mac Markway is going to do. Like there's a potential for some marquee offensive players to come here this year. And that's what's frustrating. That's why I'm so avid about quarterback has to improve, because we keep talking about, the offensive line and receiver play. I think they have the personnel everywhere else. All right. I think they have great personnel on the line. Needs to develop, but I think they've got the pieces to work with and the pieces that can develop those guys. And certainly if you get a guy like Proctor, that helps immensely. I love Keegan Johnson. I really like Arlen Bruce. If you were to land Casper, that's an extra bonus. And then certainly Regani's still here. Charlie Jones is here for this year. Tight end, Sam Laporta, Luke Lachey. I like the young guys who they have coming in. They have a lot to prove with Cale Sanderson and Addison Ostringa. But I guess my point is quarterback's the one question mark, at least this year. And even next year, again, we keep talking about development. How often do you see a true sophomore playing at Iowa? It just doesn't happen very often. So at quarterback. So I have a hard time seeing a lot of growth. I have a hard time seeing a huge jump at quarterback this year or next, especially this coming fall. This is a good comment. It was a nice class, Hawkeye Howard, and I don't want this to turn into just a discussion about what Kirk Ferentz said today. I kind of figured our show would kind of go all over the place, and I'm fine with that. But this is a really nice class, and Deshaun Lee is a nice cherry on top, right? Just one guy to sign. They had a couple wide receiver walk-ons signed today as well. And so this will be an excellent opportunity for Iowa to continue to establish itself nationally in the national recruiting landscape. They've had 2 straight years now with, I think, top 25 classes. I know Rivals had them, I think, at 27 today for the class in as a whole. But man, you have to look at it and say they've done some really good things in the recruiting trail these past few years. And I give a lot of credit to Kirk. I give a lot of credit to Tyler Barnes. Got to give some credit to Kelton Copeland because he had the likes of helped get the likes of Arlen Bruce and Keegan Johnson. They've done good work, and Charlie Jones, another one at wide receiver, and certainly Xavier Wampa and the defensive backs have been a huge, huge development. Doug, O-line could be the hinge this year on a good season again. That and QB. I hope to see. I hope to see offensive line growth. I'd like to think that they. Kirk Ferentz is an offensive line coach. Let's remember that. He is an offensive line coach. So whether or not George Barnett is doing a great job or not, I would anticipate Kirk Ferentz to be the type of guy that will really assist him this offseason and helping him come along as a position coach here at the Big Ten level. He's done it in the MAC. He's got to do it here. I think the personnel is there because they've recruited very well at the offensive line position. And again, Mason Richmond will be a year older. So will Nick DeYoung. So will Connor Colby. Those guys were all young this year. And they'll have an opportunity to grow this spring. This is a nice observation as well, Chad. Very impressed with Van Ness. Hoping to see Deontay Craig develop more pass rush moves and Logan Jones gets healthy. D-line future looking bright. And I still think Aaron Jones is going to play right away. I do. I think he's going to play right away. I know he didn't enroll early. Brian Allen has a chance to play right away. He did enroll early. I agree. Defensive line, very encouraging. They lose Van Valkenburg. Joe Evans is what he is. He's going to be a high motor guy. He's not going to be the most physically daunting defensive end in the Big Ten. But I think all of those guys have an opportunity. And I'm high on Craig as well. Van Ness certainly flew under the radar, but he has an opportunity to really develop. I hope Logan Jones can get healthy. He has really struggled with injuries here so far. And Logan Lee really came on strong this year. He's got an opportunity to be really good again next year. And, of course, Noah Shannon will be back as well. Erica says that's how the media operates these days. It's all about the headline and clickbait. At times, I would have to agree. Doug, you'll have to explain. This was a while ago. If that was the case, Corey, why is Brian still here? Doug, fill me in on what we were talking about when you made this comment so I can answer your question. Hawkeye Howard, you're getting a little carried away with the all caps today, buddy boy. You turn your caps lock off. Maybe you have it on purpose. I love this comment. This is absolutely where I was going to take this discussion, the real Hayden. So Kirk Ferentz brought up San Francisco a couple of times, and I understand he's proud of that analogy because San Francisco did kind of play Iowa football to make it to the NFC Championship game. Here's the problem. You're right. They didn't win a championship. They didn't win the NFC. They didn't win a Super Bowl. So, yeah, they had a good season. They won a lot of games. But there's a ceiling when you play that way. when your quarterback play, Jimmy Garoppolo is, I would say, bottom half of the NFL. You could argue bottom third as far as starters in the NFL. And it's not just him, right? There are other pieces of that offense. I don't think they're great at running back. Pass protection struggled in the second half against LA on Sunday. But my point is, we can use that analogy, but even San Francisco has a ceiling. So if we want to compare Iowa to San Francisco, that's fine. But San Francisco ain't winning Super Bowls. Totally agree with you. And that is a fact. Underway shift colors. Listen, it's not just both the head coach and son, it's the quarterback coach. I talked about this yesterday on our show with Mark Rogers, Underway shift colors, which, by the way, it's good to see you. It's been a while since we've seen your name on here during our live streams. I talked about that yesterday. I'm at a point now with Ken O'Keefe where you got to get it done now, because the development's not occurring at quarterback. And I'm not calling for anybody to be fired, but a change needs to be made there if things don't drastically improve this year. I just haven't seen. And when you have NFL personalities making comments about Nate Stanley, who was a 3-year starter at Iowa under Ken O'Keefe as a quarterbacks coach. By the way, he's an exclusive quarterback coach. He doesn't coach any other positions. He is a quarterbacks coach at Iowa. He's no longer the OC. So that's his one job, right? To recruit. Well, you could say 2 jobs, right? To recruit and to coach quarterbacks. The fact of the matter is, when you have NFL people telling you that Nate Stanley has bad mechanics when he ends up in the NFL, I mean, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? A 3-year starter with the athleticism, the strength, the arm muscles that Nate Stanley had, and yet he doesn't have good mechanics. We've talked about not being able to slide. Those are problems. And I absolutely agree with you. Ken O'Keefe is in a position now where he's either got to step up his game or he needs to move on. That's the way it is at any position. You're making $650,000 a year. And I pains me to say that, because I like Ken O'Keefe. He seems like a really nice, genuine person. He's got to do better. I think he would probably be the first to admit that. Doug, you're right. Kirk knows the offense has to get better, but at what level? To what extreme? I don't know that I have not heard Kirk. I don't know that the urgency is there. I guess that's what I'm saying, Doug. By responding to the question by saying, we've had the highest win percentage in the past 6 years. I just can't imagine responding that way if you are completely bought in to overhauling this offense. And it needs to be overhauled. They were like 123rd in total offense this year. It needs to be overhauled, whatever that means. So I'm not saying Kirk doesn't know what he's doing. I think he does, but you can't become satisfied to any degree, because that's when you stop improving. And not saying he's satisfied completely. I just didn't like the response from Kirk when Chad Leistiko asked him that question about changing schematics offensively to help the offense. Thank you for calling from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Who's on the line?
Okay, Howard.
How you doing, buddy?
Hey, I did, man. Sorry about the caps lock. It was unintentional.
Okay, I figured it was.
Hey, I got a question, and maybe you can help me out here. Maybe everybody else can help me out. The O-line. What's all? The O-line is really our fence against with the quarterback. So did we update our O-line with some new talent? I know we got some good guys coming in. Did we take any out of the portal, or I haven't heard much about that?
Just the Hunter Norzad kid that I was talking about earlier, and he has not committed. I mean, Iowa hasn't had a single guy commit from the portal, but he is somebody that Iowa is very, very interested in to play tackle. And he's going to, I mean, I'd have to think. Now, he played at the Ivy League level at Cornell, but I mean, when Penn State's after you, and Illinois, Brett Bielema's after you, Virginia Tech, etc., I would have to think he's going to be a plug-and-play guy as a graduate transfer. Certainly academics aren't going to be an issue with him being at Cornell. It would be great if they could land him. They got Cale Crow from Huxley, who's going to be a freshman. They got Jack Dotzler from Wisconsin, who's also a freshman who will be a future tackle. But I like, Hawkeye Howard, I've told you this before. I like the class in 21 at that position. And those guys were all young. I know David Cobb struggled with some injuries, but Connor Colby's a year older. Maybe Michael Myslinski, or trying to think of the other one. There's a couple other guys in that class that Jennings Dunker is another one. They've got talent in that 21 class. You just hope that they have improved. Bowl prep should have helped, and certainly spring will help as well. I think they have the personnel to be a good offensive line.
Basically, we just need to give the time the younger guys to develop.
Yeah, and I think I think that it should be sufficient time to be adequate, to be proficient, I guess is the right word. They're going to have sufficient time to make themselves proficient. In other words, a lot of these guys came here last summer, so they had the entire fall. They had bowl prep. They've got strength and conditioning work, spring practice, certainly more strength and conditioning work, another fall camp. So by this fall, I would have to think that some of those 21 recruits that came in, whether they enrolled early or not, I know Colby did, but even the other guys who didn't enroll early, I would have to think that that's enough time for those guys to be good enough to compete for playing time.
Yeah. Since I'm not working the past couple of days due to ice storm, I've watched some old football games on YouTube, and I got to looking from this last year. The O-line did not give our quarterbacks the necessary time to even really kind of go down his pattern. It just, to me, I could count to maybe 2 or 3, and then somebody was in the backfield. And then they need to give that at least 3 to 4 seconds for him to go through his progressions. And that's just my opinion. I'm not a coach.
No, you're right.
Never was one.
You're right. The offensive line was not good. Now, I will say this, Hawkeye Howard. It was good against Kentucky.
I got to yes, it was. It was better. It was better. But, and then on the other side of that, I'm going to say that Kentucky wasn't a very good pass rusher thing. As you said yesterday, some of their head guys were out. The pass rusher guys were out.
But my point is, regardless of the reason why it was better, I'm just saying when people say, well, that's quarterback play is not a concern because the offensive line, once it gets better, quarterback play will improve. That may be too marginally, but I'm just saying we saw, regardless of the reason, we saw an improved pass protection, whether that be because of Kentucky or because of Iowa. We saw improved pass protection in the Citrus Bowl, and I didn't see very much of a difference in quarterback play. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
But you're right.
That's true. That's very
it's
true.
not
That's very
the Kentucky performance is not proof that the offensive line has turned a corner. We need to see more.
Yes. The first 5 games. The first, I'm going to say South Dakota.
South Dakota State
will be a very good, because they're not a pushover team.
No, they're not.
No, they're not a pushover team, and Iowa State will be a good test to them. And those 2 games will predict next year's season.
Nevada has a new head coach, but they were a bowl team. No, everybody looks at. I heard somebody say the other day, though, the non-conference schedule's crap. It's not. Okay, Iowa plays 9 conference games. I don't know how many times we have to go over this. 9 conference games. The SEC plays 8. Okay, so there's your extra Power 5 marquee opponent right there, and the Iowa State game is going to happen. Iowa State was projected as a top 10 team last year. I know they're going to be down next year, but what else are you going to do? You're not going to schedule another Power 5 team besides Iowa State and that 9th game in the Big Ten. So, no, I think South Dakota State, that's a dangerous game because it's not going to help them as far as resume. Nobody's going to look at that game and say, what a great win. It's kind of like the 2016 game against North Dakota State. That's a very, very good FCS
program. That
one
broke my heart.
Yeah. I mean, it sucked, and it derailed that season.
Did we pick up anybody really good today? I know one guy you talked to the other day. I watched the replay of it. He looks like a very, very good player. Did we pick anybody else up today, or?
No, Deshaun Lee's the only guy on scholarship that Iowa added today. Let me pull up. Well, I got you here.
I know there's some walk-ons.
Yeah, let me pull up the walk-ons because they added 2 receivers today, and they're going to be pretty deep at receiver if you look up and down through walk-ons and scholarship players. So Alex Eichmann out of Wisconsin was added at receiver, and then also another Wisconsin receiver and Reese Osgood. So I don't know a whole lot about either of those guys, but certainly I will say this: we've seen walk-ons play. I mean, Jackson Ritter, number 29, played a little bit this year, and that's a position where you can sometimes get a walk-on that ends up being earning a scholarship. I believe Charlie Jones, I could be wrong on this, I believe Charlie Jones came here initially as a walk-on. Now, that doesn't mean a whole lot because he was a transfer.
It wasn't what was I'm trying to Moss. Wasn't Riley Moss a walk on?
No, he was scholarship. He was on scholarship. He was a I think a 2-star recruit out of Ankeny, but no, he was on scholarship.
Okay. But all right, well, I won't keep you any longer. I just thought I'd call in and answer some questions. So I'm not running tonight to do the ice storm. So
Good. Yeah, stay
So-
safe. It seems like you guys can't catch a break down there.
yeah, well, I got the generator ready and everything, and I was down here with the last ice storm, and I won't go through that again. 13 days without power. So,
But
But,
we'll be out of hopefully we'll be out of winter in a month or two. So I can't believe it's already February, and I guess that's going to be relief for everybody, not just people up north.
Well,
This year it's
down here we're only got a month left of winter. So
Yeah.
So
Well, it's
all
good-
right.
good to hear from you, sir. All right, appreciate it. Have a great night, and always good to hear from Hawkeye Howard. Jake the Snake says, I have always said, be careful with what you wish for when it comes to wanting Ferentz fired or to retire, but something is slowly creeping inside of me saying it's almost time. Yeah, certainly the extension would tell me that it's not almost time. I'm not saying whether I believe he should be here till 29 or not, but I'm just saying that the extension would tell me that he's not going anywhere anytime soon. Doug, and I have no problem with you backing Kirk Ferentz, and I'm not calling for his head. And yes, it can always be worse. Bob Cummings, it didn't work here. The grass is not always greener on the other side. We know that. Blake, heard this before. Quarterback coach Ken O'Keefe needs to go ASAP. I respect that take. Development has not occurred. Gary Lewis says Ty Thompson is better than anyone on Iowa's roster in 22. Erica brings up the Stoops brothers. Yeah, I keep hearing this. So if you don't think that Brian Ferentz probably won't be our next head coach, Bob Stoops. LH, here's the problem. I was pretty high on the idea that I think Bob Stoops would take this job if offered. The problem is Bob Stoops ain't going to be around to take a job in 2030. I don't believe that. Now, I don't believe Kirk Ferentz will probably see the life of that contract out. If he does, holy crap. I will be very, very surprised by that. But I see him here probably till at least 26, 27. At least. I don't see Bob Stoops at that point taking this job. I think if Kirk Ferentz retired in 24, maybe you get 5 or 6 years out of Bobby. Certainly, I think if Kirk Ferentz resigned now, I think Bob Stoops would take this job, and I think he'd be here for 8 or 9 years. That's just speculation. I have nothing. I don't know that. But that'd be my guess. Mark Stoops certainly is more of a possibility. He's younger. Potentially, he could be. I would say he's probably would be my favorite after Kirk retires to be the next head coach here. That would be my guess. No guarantees on that. I don't know, Mark. I know there have been reports that Iowa is the one school. I've even heard that Iowa is in the contract, is in Mark's contract that he can. That's the one school he can opt out of the contract for, and certainly that would be. That would not be a bad hire, right? He's done very well at Kentucky, but again, that's a long way off. Let's see here. Underway shift colors, not real high on this team. Expect a 6-6 season, if that. It's pretty bad when Minnesota's having more of an identity than the Hawks. I don't think you're going to see 6-6. I respectfully disagree with you. Underway shift colors. I've not made any record predictions, but I do believe that I was going to have a hard time getting to 10 wins. A very hard time. I do not see 10 wins in the regular season. I think if they can get to 9, that would be a very, very overachieving season for the schedule. The schedule is just murderer's row. If they can improve this offense substantially, which means quarterback play has to improve overwhelmingly so. Offensive line has to really improve, which, again, I have more faith in that happening than I do the quarterback improving. Receivers got to play better, right? The running game has to be better. There's a lot of things. The offense is a disaster right now. It is. It's a disaster. Anybody who wants to, we can be Kirk. I'm a Kirk Ferentz fan, but it's a disaster. When you're 123 in total offense, that's a disaster. There's only 130 FBS teams. When you're down towards the bottom with the likes of UConn, that's in Massachusetts, one of the worst Power 5 programs in the country, that's a problem. And again, Doug, back to Doug's comment about I think Kirk Ferentz knows he needs the offense to be fixed. I agree with you. I just, again, it comes down to a sense of urgency. And I think there needs to be an excessive sense of urgency right now because of the schedule and because of just the era of the transfer portal becoming what it has become, whether you like it or not. Erica says the O-line looked good during the Citrus Bowl. Not sure this is necessarily about O-line. It's a quarterback problem group with clock issues, bad plays. Those are also factors. The clock management has not been good. Play calling can improve, certainly. Predictability has been an issue. Again, I'm not sold on O-line play just based off that Citrus Bowl because, again, Kentucky was down a number of guys. So I have to wait and see on that. And certainly what I see during spring practice is not going to sell me. It's going to come down to the first week of September. The first week of September. Okay, Doug, thank you for explaining this. You were talking about Brian not being a possible future head coach based on the reporting, which begs the question, why is he still coaching Iowa today? Doug, I mean, I think we all know the answer to that question. Not to throw it back to you, but don't we all know the answer to that question? Why is Brian Ferentz the offensive coordinator at Iowa? Somebody answer the question for me. I mean, I'm pretty confident I know the answer, but somebody just answer the question for me. Because I think it's pretty clear why. Not saying, again, it's not a personal attack. I don't know why I feel like I have to preface everything I say by stating that it's not a personal attack. It's just not. But the bottom line is Kirk Ferentz hired Brian Ferentz. He's Kirk Ferentz's son. Erica, you're absolutely right. Jermaine, you're absolutely right. Robert, I wouldn't have used that. Doug, you're right. He's Kirk Ferentz's son. I mean, what other explanation can we come to as to why he's the offensive coordinator? So what's his coaching resume? His coaching resume is he was at New England, right, under Bill Belichick, which he, of course, got that job because of his connections and Kirk Ferentz's connections to the Patriots. And he was hired here as a position coach and elevated when Greg Davis left. And I think Greg Davis was a bit of a stopgap. He was towards the end of his career. He had success. Regardless of how much success Greg Davis were to have here, it was an easy transition from Ken O'Keefe to Greg Davis to Brian Ferentz. So that's why I don't sit here and just whine and complain about how Brian Ferentz is the head coach the offensive coordinator, because it's not going to change with Kirk here unless Brian gets an offer for a job somewhere else. And I can't imagine that happening, certainly not at a Power 5 level, unless he, could a high Power 5 program ask him to come as an offensive line coach? I guess that's possible, but that would not be perceived even as a lateral move because he's a coordinator at a Big Ten school now. So I don't see how it's going to happen. Certainly Kirk would help him get another job, I'm sure, but my guess is Kirk wants to. The most likely scenario here is Kirk stays as long as he can with his son as the offensive coordinator, hoping that Brian can end up being the next head coach. And regardless if that happens or not, he'll ride off in the sunset. And then when he leaves, Brian won't be retained. Unless some crazy thing happens and he does get hired as the next head coach, he'll go on and coach somewhere else. But the bottom line is it's not a shot at anybody, but he's the offensive coordinator in large part because he's the son of head coach Kirk Ferentz. Blake brings up Drew Tate. Of course, he's now at UNI. I still have to be, Drew Tate's got a lot to prove, Blake. I know he's a really good quarterback here. I shouldn't say really good. He was a good quarterback here. Certainly he made plays, but it'll be interesting to see what he does at UNI. I don't know how much his personality would mesh with the Iowa way, because I think there was probably some headbutting, if you will. Maybe that's a bit hyperbolic, but I don't know. I kind of look at Drew Tate when I hear Drew Tate talk. He's kind of the bad boy, and I don't know that he fits into the Iowa way. But it'll be fascinating to see what he does at UNI. There's no question about it. All right, LH. No Iowa quarterbacks have ever mattered to anything in the NFL. Maybe Chuck Long, maybe CJ as a backup. Drew Tate was successful in the CFL. Yeah, it's a huge. It comes down to recruiting and development. And Petrus was a 4-star. We got May as a 4-star. Linez is a 4-star. Jake Christensen was, I believe, a 5-star by some pundits. So it's not like they haven't been able to recruit well from a perception standpoint. It just hasn't worked out. And that's a big concern. If I'm Iowa, I'm looking at myself again, saying, why are we not developing quarterbacks coach? We got a full-time quarterbacks coach who's getting paid more than anybody in the country. Ken O'Keefe is the highest paid quarterbacks coach in the country. The results have not been there. All right, I do want to get to another clip from Kirk Ferentz today. He was asked, in addition to being asked about making offensive scheme changes, he was asked about the complexity of the offense, because we keep hearing how the offense is complex and it's hard to learn. And he was asked by Scott, I believe it was Scott Docterman of The Athletic, can you simplify this offense? And here's what Kirk Ferentz had to say.
Never going to win the metrics battles because of the style of play and ground acquisition at times, just to try to play complementary football. But you were in the hundreds in almost every offensive category this year, and probably most concerning is completion percentage over the last handful of years has been below 60%. Some of your, even your quarterbacks have talked about how complicated the offense is. Is there a way to, is it too complicated? Is there a way to simplify it? And how much more can you get out of the passing game to push some of those numbers up?
Yeah, that's certainly part of the discussion this out of season. And we especially last year, we didn't throw the ball well enough to be successful enough, if you want. And I'm sitting here thinking about the one gadget play we ran at the beginning of the first possession against Michigan. Doesn't really count because it's Monty trying to involved in that thing, and a running back throwing it. But we got to do better, and that'll be part of the discussion, certainly. And that tends to be part of if there is an issue or a problem, a lot of times it is making things harder than they need to be. So we'll certainly ask those questions.
So it's not like Kirk Ferentz is in denial. I'm not implying that he's in denial that the offense needs to get better, that the passing game needs to get better. I just want to see more of a sense of urgency. And again, perhaps some of what we've heard from him has been coach speak. That's always a possibility. So I think that has to be acknowledged. All right, let's get back to your comments here. Doug, we had a weak quarterback play. Robert, Connor Colby is playing tough and mean in the trenches. I think he's going to be a really good lineman. Again, he was a true freshman this past year and it basically ended up being Iowa's starting right guard for the entire year. Spaghetti Factory. So he says Matt Campbell to Michigan. First of all, is it possible? Absolutely. That was the first name that I came up with when I heard the Jim Harbaugh news. And again, it sounds like that's official. Have we been, obviously the Minnesota Vikings had shown interest in Matt Campbell. So it's kind of ironic now that we're talking about Harbaugh leaving for Minnesota and now Iowa being interested, or Michigan being interested in Campbell. I would have to think he's on the list. Would Michigan be a school that he would consider going to coach for? Why not? I mean, he's an Ohio guy. I'm sure he would love to compete, the chance to compete against Ohio State. Matt Campbell's probably not the hottest name on the market right now. He was a year ago, but he's coming off a 7-6 season at Iowa State. But possibly maybe it's a good time. I said this when the Notre Dame job was opened up. Maybe it's a good time to leave Iowa State if you have an opportunity to go to Michigan, because that job ain't going to come open for at least, even if the next coach fails, they're going to give him 3 to 4 more years. So, Ryan Day's probably not going anywhere unless he goes to the NFL at some point, which I doubt, at least not anytime soon. The only other job that I could see opening up that would be bigger than Michigan would be Alabama. How long does Nick Saban, how much does he have left in the tank? But would Alabama target Matt Campbell? I have no idea. But certainly he's going to be a candidate. He's already being a name tossed around for the Michigan job. But no, in answer to Erica, that's not official. Not that I've heard. I don't even know if the Matt Camp is the Jim Harbaugh news official. I'm assuming it is, right? That those are the reports, but I have not heard anything official. So I don't think that is official yet. I don't think either. Certainly the Matt Campbell news is not. That's not even news. That's just speculation at this point. But we'll see what happens with Harbaugh. Cooper, Spencer's not great, but you can be below average and still have a bad game. Spencer had a bad game against Kentucky. He missed throws that he has shown he can make when he has time. Yeah, I mean, let's just be honest here, though, Cooper. We saw in 2020, okay, 2020, look back at the tape. Iowa went 6-2. Very successful season. It was predicated on a run game that averaged over 4.2 yards per carry, and an offensive line that protected Spencer Petras well. But quarterback play was still not great. In fact, you could say it was well below average. So all I'm saying is, even with an improved offensive line, I'm telling you, quarterback play is not going to be good. It may inch up to average, but I have no reason to think it's going to be anything above average. And if you want to have a good offense, you need to have at least a good, adequate quarterback. And that's why Iowa really hasn't had, that's part of the reason why Iowa hasn't had very good offenses at any point during Kirk's tenure, minus a couple of years, Brad Banks' year. Shocker that Brad Banks' year was the one year where Iowa's offense was actually really good, because it starts with quarterback play. You can't hide your quarterback in college football. Ian, lacking info on quarterback coaching argument, 20 hours a week in season, 8 hours a week out of season, total amount allowed by NCAA. Okay, so I'm trying to get what your point here is, Ian. I'm not disagreeing with you. But I mean, again, all these coaches have the same amount of time with their athletes. So as it relates to Ken O'Keefe, he's the highest paid QB's coach in the country. Okay. He's the highest. Okay. Now there are offensive coordinators like Lincoln Riley that coach quarterbacks as well, but I'm talking strictly quarterbacks coach. He is the highest paid quarterbacks coach in the country. Now there is a reason, Ian, why Iowa has, I don't know if it's Iowa doing this, but Spencer Petras, Nate Stanley, Marco Lainez is another guy who's gotten help from Tony Graciopi out east, because these guys need to have private development. Although I don't think it's probably the best to have multiple cooks in the kitchen, so to speak. That's just the modern age. That's the age we live in. These guys they're going to have personal coaches, personal trainers. And again, I'm not saying that I would be able to do better as far as coaching quarterbacks, developing quarterbacks. But when Ken O'Keefe is here exclusively as a quarterbacks coach, you've got to expect more out of the highest paid QB's coach in the country. Blake, South Dakota State is really good because I know I go to UNI versus South Dakota State games. Yeah, it's a great program. They were the semifinals of the FCS playoffs this year. Absolutely. The man here, this is a basketball question. I have no problem answering that. Is Iowa still in good shape to make the tournament? And the man here, you must not have listened to my podcast that was released yesterday. Go check that out. Week 188 of Brad has Branded Thoughts here from the Hawkeye of the Storm, because first segment of that show, I talk about the schedule. I talk about the tournament. I think Iowa's going to make the tournament still. I know people are down after that Penn State loss. I think they will make the tournament. But boy, every game becomes that much more important. The stretch after Penn State, Iowa needs to win 3 straight after the Ohio State game. They need to win 3 straight games after Thursday. They can win Thursday, it's a huge bonus, but they need to win 3 straight games after Thursday, and they'll be right back where they need to be as far as, they'll be back to 500 if they do that, which would be fantastic. Jared the actor. The new Kirk starting to feel a lot like the old Kirk, uninspired, bland play calling in 21, sending football back decades. Get ready for more of the same in 22. So what was the new Kirk? I want somebody to explain it to me, because I know everybody wants to talk about the new Kirk. So he went for it more on 4th downs. All right, we had some trick plays that I think were probably designed by LeVar Woods, or at least prompted by LeVar Woods. But everybody talks about the new Kirk. I just don't know what that was, because the offense wasn't that good in 17 or 18 either. And by the way, those trick plays, minus that little toss from Gavin Williams to Monty Pottebaum in the Big Ten title game, those trick plays have gone away. Remember how many fake field goals and fake punts Iowa ran in 17 and 18? What happened to those? Those have been completely deserted. I don't know why. They just have been. I wouldn't say Iowa went for it very much on 4th down. Not to say that that's, just because you go for it more on 4th down doesn't make it right or wrong. I think Nick Saban's a perfect example of it. He knows when to roll the dice, and he knows when not to. And at times, many times, Iowa's, I think, far too conservative. I think most people would probably agree with that. All right. Nick says Kirk will ride this out until 2029 unless like it turns into Hayden Fry's last 2 years. And that's what I don't want to have happen, Nick, because there are a lot of people that felt like Hayden Fry wore out his welcome here. He's always going to be a legend here for Iowa football, but you don't want to see Kirk leave like that. And that's why had Kirk left this year, if this press conference today was not about a season wrap up and signing day, if it was instead about him retiring, if he was announcing his retirement, it would have made some sense because he's coming off a 10-win season. Yes, the offense is trending in the wrong direction, but he just won 10 games. He won the West. That's a pretty good way to go out. And I just don't want to see with the schedule getting tougher. The schedule's harder. Schedule was cake this past year. I mean, it was not difficult relative to the rest of the conference. I just don't want to see it go in the wrong direction and see Kirk Ferentz wearing out his welcome here. I hope that doesn't happen. Jeffrey, if I was betting next year, there's no way I would ever take an over next season. I don't know what the over-under is. I mean, if the over-under is 7.5, I think that's probably what I would guess, is it's going to be 7.5. If it's 8.5, I would take the under. 7.5, that's right about where I project this team. I might go over because I think Iowa could scratch its way to 8 wins, but that's probably the mark. 7 or 8 wins, and we'll see what it is. I don't know when the odds makers start creating those over-unders. Arona Stahl. I'm pronouncing your name rightly, I hope. Running game looked great during the bowl game, and line is going to improve. Absolutely agree with that second part. Actually, both parts. The running game did look really good during the bowl game. Line is going to improve. Deep skill positions, but blank, the quarterback needs to improve. Yeah, perfect summary. Perfect summary. And again, I don't want to read too much into the Citrus Bowl performance, even on the ground, because I do believe part of that was Kentucky was missing a lot of its defenders, and that certainly did not help. But Iowa was missing Tyler Goodson and ran pretty darn well. I liked what I saw to Gavin and LaShawn Williams. No question about it. And I like what I see from Caleb Johnson and Jazian Patterson on tape. They're not enrolling early, but they'll be here this summer, and you hope they can provide them some depth at running back. Avery says, you could tell by the press conference today that Kirk hates everything about the new style of sports, social media, and transfer portal for sure. Can't disagree. I mean, certainly he doesn't like the portal. And certainly doesn't like social media. So, yeah, I think you hit it on the head, Avery. Yakov 22, between J.J. McCarthy and Cade McNamara, one will transfer after spring, and that's even before the Harbaugh saga. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. That's a Michigan team coming to Iowa City next year, possibly without their quarterback, possibly without their head coach. They still got a lot of talent, but, man, that'll be an interesting rematch. I think Iowa fans will be ready for that one in Kinnick. Real Hayden says it's nepotism, nepotism. Heard that before, and I'm not going to use that term. I'm not saying that. I think that's a pretty, you have a right to say that, the Real Hayden, and I'm not saying you're wrong. I think it's a pretty heavy accusation, but I can see where you're coming from, and I'm not disagreeing. I'm not agreeing. I'm not disagreeing, but I definitely see where you're coming from. Destiny Pirate, good to see you here with us this afternoon. I'd name my son, who played rugby instead, as OC of this offense. Only one direction to go. Arona, with this lawsuit, there is zero chance he gets any interest as a head coach at any Power 5. Speaking about Brian, the man here, Corey, you could use your strong standing in the Ames community, and could you use your strong standing in the Ames community and get Brian a job at ISU? Yeah, first of all, the first part of that statement is humorous. I have a real strong standing in the Ames community. I'm just known all over the place. And I don't think I know Iowa State fans view Brian as I hate to say it, as a joke. That's how they view him. Now they view anybody that's on the other side as a joke. So, clowns like to make jokes and like jokes, but he's not going to Iowa State. I keep seeing, you keep seeing these sarcastic posts on social media about somebody said that Brian, as a joke, of course, Brian was rumored to be the next head coach at Michigan, which makes everybody laugh. Same thing happened with the Oklahoma job when that opened up. I don't know where Brian would get a job. That's a great question. I have no idea. Courtney, Brian worked for Bill Belichick, who is now under investigation for racism in the hiring process. Curious if that will come up at all. So I don't know the whole situation with Brian Flores. That's a very fresh story, Courtney. I did see a little bit of that this morning. So I don't want to speak out of turn on this, but I think that's certainly a conclusion that you're drawing. Again, I don't want to speak out of turn on it, but Brian has had his own issues. You think about the press box blow up in 2017, the accusations made by some of the former players, whether you agree with them or not, or you believe them or not. He's got his own problems, regardless of the Bill Belichick connection. The real Hayden, any other program would fire an OC with 5 straight years of bottom third offense in Division I, and if no other school wants his services, why do we need him? Food for thought. Doesn't matter if the head coach isn't willing to make that move. I can't disagree with you, the real Hayden, but Kirk is not firing Brian. It's just not happening. Brian Ferentz says Drew made plays up in the huddle. Yeah, that's probably part of the reason why he scared Kirk Ferentz. But Kirk Ferentz, I give him credit. He was a very successful starter, so he allowed Drew some wiggle room there. But I can't imagine Drew here as a quarterback's coach. It would be intriguing. Maybe it'll happen. Maybe he'll be the next quarterback's coach. Maybe Ken will be the next. Maybe he'll be here for 2 more years, and Drew will go from UNI here. That's possible. I mean, if he does really good things at UNI, I don't know how you could take him off the table. Certainly think that would be interesting. Jeffrey, Brian Ferentz needs to step down before the lawsuit goes to court. Everything gets put on the record. Not only will he not get a coaching job, but he may be out of football totally. Nick says this offense is so complex. Run 15 yards out, 2 yards up. Quarterbacks can't handle that. I detect sarcasm there. Underway Shifts Color says, listen, Corey, have to roll, but keep up the good work and great. Let's go Hawks. Thank you, Underway Shift Colors. Appreciate you being here and appreciate the encouragement. Good to have you on our show. All right, we're going to hang out here for a couple more minutes here. I do want to let everybody know the line is open. If you want to call in, talk Iowa football, 515-635-1601. 515-635-1601. I want to go to one final clip from Kirk Ferentz today that I wanted to share with all of you. And this was on, we're talking about Brian Ferentz. So he was asked specifically about that topic of nepotism and if Kirk can relate to or understand where fans are coming from that accuse Kirk of nepotism. And here's how Kirk Ferentz responded to that line of questioning.
Lines. If anybody received more criticism than Spencer this year, it was Brian. Sure. And, the numbers are the numbers. A lot of people with your relationship, obviously you're his dad, so they wonder if there's either nepotism involved and why he's still here and another coach may not be. What gives you faith that Brian could do the job that he's doing and do it well to remain the offensive coordinator?
A couple things. So going back to the last question, he's an adult and he's getting paid. I'm not saying he's fair game, but when you get paid, I look at the world a whole lot differently if you're getting a salary versus being a college athlete. And so that's the way it goes. And I've joked about it, but it is the worst position. And with social media, it's become all-time worst position is the guy who calls plays. The nepotism, I would say, my approach, and believe me, I've thought about all this stuff. We didn't exactly light it up in 04. We were next to last in rushing. Can't remember who was last, but next to last in rushing. But, we didn't torch it up or tear the playbook up after that. We were not a very good team. I still remember like yesterday, spring of 08, Tom Moore in our facility Saturday morning or Friday morning, whatever time he got here, ridiculously early. And I walk in the conference room, he's watching our film from 07. And I asked him what he's doing. He said, I'm watching your film. I said, why? Because, we were terrible on offense. But my answer there is, after those 2 seasons, we just went back to work. And that's what we do. So, it's my judgment to decide if we got the best people in the building. That's my obligation. My judgment's my obligation to the program, most importantly to our players. And, again, I feel really good about our staff. I think we got a real capable staff, talented staff. So, we're gonna find solutions and get better. And that's my responsibility. I'm the head coach.
That's right. It's his responsibility as the head coach. And I think a lot of people would argue that there's a conflict of interest there. I understand that line of reasoning. And, I mean, I don't know what the parallel is to 04, but I mean, I guess he was just saying, well, when you have a bad season, you get back to work. Again, kind of beating around the question a bit. Obviously, he doesn't look at it as nepotism, but he is Brian's dad. The one thing in there, too, that he stated was the comment about, the offensive coordinator is going to be the most criticized person besides the quarterback due to the fact that he's the one calling the plays. And that's true. But I mean, I think we can all agree that is not completely, I don't think we can sit here and say that the primary or the only reason why people want Brian Ferentz out is because of play calling. It's because of the numbers we brought up earlier. Iowa has been bad in almost every category, right? As far as an offensive ranking, total offense, rushing offense, passing completion percentage, like every one of those stats is bad. So it's got nothing to do with just play calling. That's one part of it. But Iowa's offense is not performing in any regard. In any regard. So, like, it's not just play calling. But again, what's Kirk Ferentz going to say? What's he going to say when he's asked that question? It was a good question from Scott Docterman. And by the way, I thought there were some good questions from the media today. I understand people who were mad about Rob Howe asking Kirk Ferentz those questions, especially at the end, more about the committee. And I understand people upset about that. But I did think there were some good questions, some good, tough questions to Kirk, specifically not only about the committee, but also about Brian Ferentz, this offense. And those are questions, as he brought up, Kirk Ferentz is absolutely right. When you're getting paid, and as much as Brian Ferentz is getting paid just under $1 million a year, you can take some questioning. You can take some criticism. You're not going to play the victim. You can't do that. And Kirk Ferentz is absolutely right in stating that Brian Ferentz can handle that. He absolutely can, and he absolutely should. Destiny Pirate, if the O-line improves, the offense will improve. Has Iowa beaten OSU, before? Well, of course they have. 2016 against Michigan at home, 2017 against Ohio State at home. Has Iowa beat Purdue Whiskey before? Absolutely. Split those. We could go 10-2 and then to Indy. If the offensive line improves, the offensive line, I agree with that. If offensive line improves, the offense will improve. But I just think you're still putting a pretty low ceiling on an offense if you're just banking on that line to improve. Quarterback play is flatlining. Nothing else improves substantially. I don't see Iowa getting to 10-2. I just don't. That's a lot that has to happen. I think we could, honestly, Destiny Pirate, I could see Iowa going to Indy at 9-3. I've looked at the schedule. I could see that happening. Not saying it will, but I could see that happening. 10-2, I just don't see. Avery, any updates on Mac Markway? I did retweet something about this, Avery, and I don't know if you're following me on Twitter, but I found it interesting that Mac, he quoted a tweet from Tom Lemming, who's a recruiting guru, that apparently Tim Brewster is very interested in the Notre Dame tight end job. Now, Brewster was in hard on Mac Markway, and I believe he was the guy that kind of got Mac to commit to Florida. So I don't know. This is just what Tom Lemming is reporting, that Tim Brewster is very interested in the Notre Dame job. If he gets hired at Notre Dame, that would hurt Iowa's chances, I would have to think, at landing Mac. Mac was just on campus, though, here a few days ago. He's another one that would be a part of a potentially really impressive offensive lineup. Is just a year or two down the road with, again, those guys we talked about earlier, Proctor, Keegan Johnson, Arlen Bruce, potentially Kyler Casper, but nothing yet. And I don't know a timeline as far as when Mac wants to make that decision, but I think if you're an Iowa fan, you're probably hoping that Tim Brewster does not get hired as the next tight ends coach at Notre Dame. All right. Let me see here. Ian, so you want teaching fundamentals or installing the offense going over film? Well, so I would think that 20 hours a week, Ian, is time to do both, right? I mean, if that's what we're saying. I mean, first of all, film with how, and this would be a great question for Don Patterson. I'd love to have this conversation with Don sometime, but with players able to take film home with them now, right? Everything can be done electronically. you have an opportunity to sort of put everything in hyperspeed. And I would have to think that there is plenty of time, and fundamentals should be, I mean, that's what Kirk Ferentz he talked about that today. Fundamentals are what Iowa prides itself on. So it's just confounding to me that Iowa quarterbacks struggle with fundamentals. That's the most confounding thing about Iowa to me, is the fact that quarterback development, and it starts with fundamentals, is not better. It's just mind-boggling to me. But it comes down to Ken O'Keefe, Brian Ferentz, and of course Kirk Ferentz as the head coach. Something needs to change there. There's no question about it. All right. Cooper says, I don't think Spencer is the answer. I don't think Padilla is either. People have said the Kentucky game shows that the line was not the problem. I don't think that's true. That was my point. Nick says, brutal. Joe Brady goes to Bills to be quarterback's coach. Iowa dropped the ball there. Brian Ferentz and Kirk's offense needs revamped. This guy would have changed the offense for good. Destiny Pirate. Iowa's focus is great O-line, so they recruit pocket quarterbacks. When the O-line fails, average pocket quarterbacks fall. Given this, why will we ever recruit dual threat quarterbacks better suited to college ball? I think Marco Lainez has an opportunity to be really good. He's not Kyler Murray, but he is a guy who I think is probably the most mobile quarterback if he ends up starting, he will be Iowa's most mobile quarterback since Brad Banks. That's my opinion. I could be wrong. Maybe that prediction will fall flat on its face, but he is very athletic, and I like Marco Lainez a lot. Again, a lot to prove, but he's not here till 23. Doug, absolutely right. Better to go out like Hayden than Joe Paterno. Absolutely. Robert, Kirk does get paid enough. Why can't he coach for Big Ten championships instead of winning mediocrity or mediocrity? Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. I'm sure there were Iowa fans that were frustrated when Kirk said, well, our job is, after he fell back on the winning percentage over the past 6 years, that's our job is to win those games. I think you have to say part of the job is to win championships. And Robert, Iowa hasn't won a Big Ten championship since 2004, hasn't won a Big Ten championship outright in Kirk Ferentz's tenure here. So we can fall back on winning percentage all we want, but Iowa's not winning championships. They did win the West title, which is an accomplishment. I'm not taking that away from them, but the problem is, Iowa went 10-4, but the issue is 3 of the 4 losses were in absolute blowout fashion. Iowa got embarrassed against Purdue. They got embarrassed against Wisconsin. They got embarrassed against Michigan. That is the problem. Okay. They were not even competitive in those 3 games. They were competitive against Kentucky. The other problem, too, is Iowa goes 12-0 in 2015. They play a close game against Michigan State and then get absolutely embarrassed in the Rose Bowl. So in the biggest games, Iowa has not come through. And that is the other side of that argument. Thank you for calling from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Who's on the line?
This is Patrick. How you doing, Corey?
Good. How are you, Patrick? Can you hear me,
Hello?
sir? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. You hear me?
Yep, I can hear you. How are you, Patrick?
Good. Good discussion today. I just have a couple of comments. One, Kirk's press conference. I mean, I've seen enough of those. I know usually what's going to come out of them. I guess what I took from this one today is that, the only thing that's going to change is that nothing's going to change. And I think that, next year, if the O-line comes around, if the running game improves, which I think it will, that in and of itself is probably going to make the quarterback, whoever it is, look a little bit better because they won't have to throw as much. And there won't be as much pressure, running 3rd and 10s or 3rd and 8s all the time.
I agree.
So that's my comment on that. The other thing I wanted to address was the lawsuit. That lawsuit, in my opinion, is never going to see a courtroom. It's just not. Iowa is going to make that thing go away. And I would bet you right now that over the past however many months that there is negotiating that's going on constantly. I see that thing getting settled out of court. I think, in my opinion, I think it's just a money grab anyway by those former players. And I don't like it, but I think that thing is going to get settled. I think there's going to be a monetary settlement with those guys that Iowa's going to pay because they're going to want it to go away. They're not going to want anything getting dragged through the media in a trial or in a courtroom. So that is not going to happen. I can promise you that's not going to happen.
Well, how many times will the big money donors and the people that actually have an influence on Iowa football and Iowa athletics, how many times are they going to be okay with Iowa having to pay for its own blunders? Like the whether it be Chris Doyle being paid whatever many million he was paid, and Tracy Griesbaum at field hockey being paid out a large sum. And I mean, you could just go down the list. Iowa continues to get into these legal problems, and they end up buying out so that they're not, so that it goes away. And I think that's a problem at the top, and they're not just Kirk Ferentz. That's the problem at the top.
It is a problem at the top, but in this case, because it's it involves, unfortunately, it involves racial bias. These guys are going to get paid out, and I think the University of Iowa is going to want to sweep this thing under the rug as quick as they can. These guys, once they settle, I mean, I've been involved in enough of these things over the years. Once they settle, they're going to be legally bound that they cannot even mention this case.
Yeah, like Chris
so
Doyle.
It's once it's done, it's done.
Yeah, but it's exactly like the Chris Doyle situation. I mean, it's how this world operates. It's ridiculous, but that's how it operates. And, I don't know if anything's going to change though, because again, I put a lot of this on Gary Barta. I'm not talking specifically the racial issues, but I think it's just like the fact that, this extension for Kirk Ferentz to 2029, whether you're in favor of that or not, the fact that was announced basically, and I know Gary Barta is not working for the Gazette and vice versa, but like the fact that the committee dissolving story was released, days after the extension was announced, like it's almost like Iowa doesn't have any idea what it's doing with PR. It doesn't have any idea how to time things appropriately. And that comes down to one person. That's Gary Barta. And
absolutely. Yep,
and so
absolutely.
I just keep pointing to the top, not necessarily Kirk, because it's not. I think about what Gary Barta did with Fran McCaffrey years ago. I was in the middle of a terrible season after Peter Jock graduated. That next year was terrible, and Iowa had signed him to an extension during the middle of that year. I mean, it was the most ridiculous thing ever. And that's just scratching the surface of some of the blunders that Gary Barta has been a part of during his time here at Iowa. And that's why I'm very critical of Gary Barta because of it. And you're right. The lawsuit's going to be most likely is going to end up not being finalized in court. It'll be finalized out of court, and it'll be yet another indictment on Iowa administration.
Yeah, but it'll be a back page story, and that's where they're going to want to keep it. They just are not going to want this thing getting dragged through the media for a number of weeks. So you're going to see it happen, and you'll see it go away quickly. And,
I will disagree with you. It will be the headliner on ESPN when it occurs, though. At least for a period of time, it will be huge news because the media will jump all over it.
It will. But it'll be brief.
Right.
And people have short memories.
I agree.
So it's not going to be the huge deal that it could be if they actually went to court.
Money is has a healing power in this world, unfortunately, sir. That's just
yes, it does. It's just the way we live now, and
I know.
That's the way the country operates, and we just deal with it. I don't like it, but that's the way it is.
I can disagree with you, Patrick.
So, yeah, I mean, we'll see how it plays out, but I bet you that right now both sides are negotiating a settlement.
Absolutely,
and it's just a question of how much it's going to be.
Yep, and I think every one of those players that's involved in the lawsuit, every one of them, if I recall, I'd have to look back at the players that are named in that lawsuit, but I think every one of them, I don't think any one of those players made any substantial money in the NFL. I mean, I don't know
No.
what Cavante Martin-Manley, what he made at Cleveland when he was on the practice squad, or what Akram made in Tennessee when he was on the practice squad. But I can see there is the argument. I hear people say that it's a money grab. I understand that side of the coin, and I'm not disagreeing with it because I'm not inside those players' heads. I wasn't behind doors seeing what was occurring, but certainly it doesn't look good.
No, I mean, the truth is that we're never going to know the truth. So it'll have its day and it'll go away.
Yeah,
and it'll go away quickly.
That's how these problems work.
Right.
All right, sir.
So anyway, that's all I wanted to comment on, and it's a good show, a lot of good discussion.
Appreciate it, Patrick. Thanks for calling, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Okay, Corey, you take care, bud.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah, and absolutely, and I want to make it clear, I'm not trying to downplay the racial disparities and the issues that were clearly there. I mean, there were enough players that came forward to say that there were changes that needed to be made. It's just unfortunate that everything turns into a lawsuit. It's just unfortunate that that's how this world operates. But I think Patrick nailed it on the head. So thanks for the call, Patrick. The man here says, let's all chip in and get Corey and Aaron Rodgers jersey. Hawkeye Howard agrees. Brian says, yes, I need one. Real Hayden, you say I'd burn it. I was very outspoken yesterday on the show with Mark about how I'm not a big fan of Aaron Rodgers, right? And I'm for all the Packer fans, I'm sorry about that. I think a lot of Packer fans are kind of fed up with Aaron Rodgers. Not all of them, but I acknowledge he's a really talented guy. Would I wear an Aaron Rodgers jersey? It would take some financial incentive. We were just talking to Patrick about how money can do a lot of can change a lot. I think it would take some financial incentive for me to come on here with an Aaron Rodgers jersey. So, but thank you, the man here. And if somebody wants to send me an Aaron Rodgers jersey, we can have that discussion. So reach out to me. All right. Nick says, take this into consideration. I work at a factory where I have to produce 15,000 of something a day and only produce 2,000 a day. I won't have that job very long. Just incredible. He still has a job. You can use any analogy to describe what's not occurring on offense, whether it be quarterback play or wherever. Absolutely. It's a good analogy. Absolutely. The expectations need to be higher on that side of the ball. It should not just be a black and white. How many wins did Iowa have this year? Oh, they had 10. Well, that means you're not going to make any changes with the staff. And unfortunately, that's sort of the culture and the climate that Kirk Ferentz has produced. And maybe, and I'd have to look back at the Hayden Fry era. Maybe I could ask Don Patterson this question: how often did Hayden Fry fire coaches? I just don't know. I mean, maybe somebody who's an older fan can answer that question. Did Hayden Fry release coaches of their duties? So I don't, because certainly Kirk Ferentz, I don't know that he's ever fired a coach. You have to have different expectations though for each position. It's not just like, I mean, it's such a good analogy, Nick, because if you were working in this factory, and your production is suffering, you're not just going to say, well, forget it, because the total what's the term? The total revenue for the year for the company sustained itself or was still above average, because you can do better in this specific field. Right? Production was suffering here. You fixed that problem. I don't know how else to explain it. It seems obvious to me, but it obviously is not obvious to other people. Thank you for calling from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Who's on the line?
Hey, Corey, it's the real MVP.
How are you, sir? I see your question here. What's wrong with Rodgers? Are you really going to get into a debate with me about Aaron Rodgers?
Listen. I kind of wanted to ask that question because you kind of. Hold on. Let me explain on a bigger point, okay?
Okay.
It's not that if you ask that question, 50% of people will say one thing, 50% of people will say something else. And unfortunately, that's just the reality of all these situations. And if you look at the geographical, I guess even political trends of Iowa, as your last caller was suggesting, that diversity story will poof in the wind. And you may not like that, you may not like that, but that is going to be the reality of the situation.
The fact that a lawsuit's involved here, I'm not saying if somebody's mistreated and there are damages done, then, I mean, that person deserves to be, I don't know, amended. The situation needs to be fixed, but
There should be justice.
yeah, but it's just this world's. I think you and I can both agree this world's sense of justice is so off kilter. People don't know
Well, it depends on who you ask is the problem. It's that 50-50 thing.
right.
Half of the people will say, depending on case, team red loses, this is a tragedy. Team blue loses, it's a tragedy.
Right.
Regardless of what the outcome is, they'll listen to like 5 people. And also with the diversity thing, with the Brian Flores lawsuit, that's going to supersede the Iowa lawsuit probably 20 to 30 to 1.
Yeah,
because
I'll
it's
have
the
to.
NFL and all that stuff.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to do more digging on that because I saw a little bit on I think it was Good Morning America this morning, but I really don't. I'm not well versed on the whole Brian Flores situation. I saw the Bill Belichick exchange, read that, but yeah, that's going to be a major story. I mean, now that we're heading into the off season, it's too bad, right? That that's happening right now because the Super Bowl should be what people are talking about, and hopefully that gets the majority of people's attention next week. But the Brian Flores story doesn't sound like it's going away anytime soon.
Right. Well, I don't like being that guy, but a good point was brought up, and I do have to bring it up. It's awfully ironic that Brian Flores, one of the few African American coaches, happened to sue the NFL on the very first of Black History Month about racial disparities. That timing is interesting, I would say. Now, does that mean anything? No,
yeah.
But it is interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting. I mean, I don't know if it was calculated or not. Yeah. I say I hate even commenting on it because I just know very little about the story.
Oh yeah, I mean, the most interesting part to me is he accused the Dolphins of losing games. Now, if that's true, I don't see how the NFL doesn't just crush the Dolphins. So
well, the Dolphins have had their own. The Dolphins have had their own problems over the years. With you go back to the Jonathan Martin, Richie Incognito situation, correct? Now, was that done at Miami or was Incognito thereafter? Where was that situation that take place?
I know he went to the Raiders afterwards, or maybe the Bills, and he was actually promoted. Get this, Corey, okay? They played the Dolphins. I don't know if it was the Bills or the Raiders, but he was promoted to team captain when they played the Dolphins. That's petty on a whole different level.
Yeah.
That's beyond petty.
Yeah. But that story largely disappeared as well.
Yeah. I mean, not largely. I would say it completely disappeared. If you ask the average person that is even mildly interested in sport who Richie Incognito is, they'd be like, I'm familiar with that name, but who is
or who Jonathan Martin is. Yeah.
Right. So that's what I think will happen with them. I saw your interview with Deshaun Lee.
Yeah.
He seems like a really good kid.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, he does. And he had some high major offers, and I mean your Kentucky Wildcats offered him. So now I don't know if he was I don't know if Kentucky still had a spot for him up until today. I don't know. But he was on the offer. They were on the offer list, and so, in Syracuse, Pittsburgh was at one time they were both interested in him and offered. So you just even with guys that don't get those high major offers, if he's coming to play for Phil Parker, you have confidence that Parker is going to develop these young men, and it just happens.
Well, the one thing I will say about Iowa is, regardless of how good they are on the field, they have one of the best talented group of men in terms of their intellectual capacity.
Oh yeah.
They're not going to be arrested. They're not going to do drugs. They're not going to do all the stupid stuff that most college kids, unfortunately, that exist do. And
absolutely.
So that's great.
The character of this class has been, at least everybody I've only talked to maybe a third of the class, if that. The kids, the ones I've talked to have just been very high. You can tell very high character, very intelligent young men, and I give Kirk Ferentz credit because they appear to have recruited very well these last 2 years, and also have recruited very well, not only from a character standpoint, from a skill standpoint. And that's why Iowa's recruiting classes these last 2 years, you could argue, were top 25 in the country back to back.
Right. I think, I hope Iowa does well in terms of their field and how on their on-play performance and stuff, but Do you have any update on what's going to happen at QB? Or do you think it's officially Petrus all the way now?
I mean, I would certainly favor Petrus at this point. I think it needs to be an open competition. You know that I was big on the idea that Iowa needed to go after somebody in the transfer portal.
Yeah.
But to be completely frank, I think it should be anybody's job. It should be Labus's job if he's deserving. It should be Padilla's job if he's deserving. They should all get the same number of snaps with the ones this spring. There is no leg up. Nobody has earned a leg up. I don't want to hear people say that Petrus is ahead of so-and-so. That's not. Quarterback play was so below average this year and even 2020. It needs to be wide open.
Oh, yeah. And the thing is, with Iowa's defense and their special teams last year, I mean, you can make a legitimate argument if they had an average quarterback. They would be they could make a New Year's Six Bowl last year if they just had an average quarterback or above average quarterback, I guess. If they had JT Daniels, Keenan Sloves, somebody like that. Yeah,
but Durrell MVP, they won 10 games. That's what I keep being told. People keep telling me when I criticize Iowa's offense and I criticize quarterback play, they won 10 games, and you heard Kirk Ferentz say it today. They're top 3 in the country in win percentage over the past 3 years or 6 years or whatever that is. So, I mean,
well, yeah, but so is Coastal Carolina.
Different level. I'll give Iowa credit.
You see what I'm saying?
Well, the fact that Iowa hasn't won any championships is where I stand on that. I mean, who cares if you have a lower winning percentage? I mean, heck, Northwestern has won more West titles than Iowa has in the past 5 years. I think Northwestern's won 2 since 2016, if I'm correct. And Iowa's won the 1. So that's just not an argument I like. Yes, you won 10 games. Was it because of your offense or was it in spite of your offense? I think we know the answer to that question. Don't tell me that Iowa played complimentary football. That's just ridiculous.
Yeah, at best, it's an 80-20, in my opinion.
At best.
It's hard for a defense to go out there and every week, if they give up 24 points, I mean, what do they have, a 5% chance of winning? 10?
The defense showed up every week. I mean,
but you know how hard that is to do year in and year out?
That's why Phil Parker is one of the best coordinators in the country. I mean, it just is.
Well, I guess what I was trying to say is maybe the quarterback coach's money should go to Phil Parker.
Well, I don't know how much Phil is making. I hope that Phil's making close to $1 million.
Well,
I mean,
in terms of being number
more.
one, like he should be number one in his field.
Oh,
instead
sure.
of the quarterback coach.
Yeah, that's a good point. Absolutely. Yeah.
So
I don't know.
And Corey, I would like to apologize. Auburn, I thought they were number one, but Portland, Gonzaga plays Portland tonight, and that's going to push them over the top for me.
Okay. Listen, who did Auburn play last night? Alabama.
Yeah.
And they won, right? Or they won, right?
Yeah, they crushed them.
They didn't crush them.
Like
They did not crush.
win.
Hold on a second. They did not crush them. Okay.
They were up 20 at half.
I don't care what they were up at half. What was the final score?
I think it was like 100 and something to 90s, 80s. I could take a look.
Oh, I'm gonna take a look right now. 100 to 81. Yeah, I mean that's a comfortable win, but crushing a team is what Gonzaga is doing every night. They're winning games by 30, 35 points.
Yeah. I know. Portland is really close to Alabama in terms of skill level. So if they win by 10 more points, that's the thing that's gonna break the camel's back for the committee.
I listen. I understand where you're coming from. I'm telling you, if there was a percentage that was attached, they're very close. Does that make you happier? They're very close in my book.
I don't mind that you have Gonzaga number one.
Oh, yes,
I find
you do.
it
You
hilarious
do mind.
and funny.
You very much mind.
Okay, I'm on just a little bit, okay?
Yeah. No,
but
you
there's plenty of jokes to be made about it.
Listen,
you can make jokes at Auburn. They gave up 100. They scored 107 points and still lost the basketball game. You know how hard that is to do in college?
I know. Yeah.
I mean,
well, that's why that's why I brought and even last night. I mean, I look at that performance. Auburn gave up 81. I mean, that's a pretty high number, but they scored 100.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
you know,
Yeah, and they were. I'm not sure if you've seen their center. Their center is becoming elite. He had 7 blocks against Alabama.
yeah, spirit of Charles Barkley. But it's splitting hairs right now. College basketball. That's why I like where we're at right now with college hoops, because you've got probably, and I don't know if you agree with this, Sterling MVP, but my poll this week, I had basically my top 6, 7, 8 somewhere in there. There's, I think, a gap after you hit that 7 or 8. There's a gap after that, and I don't know exactly where to draw that line.
I would agree with that in general, but some of the teams that you have in your 7 or 8, I have in my 12 or 13 range.
Wisconsin,
but
you don't have
okay.
Wisconsin. You don't have Wisconsin very high, do you?
No.
Yeah, Wisconsin.
The problem is
they're beating a lot of teams.
They are beating a lot of teams, but they remind
teams.
me a lot of the Tennessee Titans. I just don't trust them. I know that's disrespectful, and if you're a Wisconsin fan, you should kind of feel disrespected for that comment. But I just don't trust you to go far in March.
Well, we'll see. I mean, they haven't done it with Greg Gard, but Bo Ryan had Gary Close with him. Went to a couple Final Fours, so we'll see if Gard can get it done. They got plenty of talent with Johnny Davis and Tyler Wall and Davison. They got but Davison's gone and Davis will be gone, so they have an opportunity, a window to win right now.
Oh yeah, I completely agree with that. I could see them losing to maybe a 12 or 13 seed like Vermont or Davidson. I'm not sure if you've seen Davidson. Davidson can be a 12 or 13 seed that makes the Sweet 16.
I don't.
They're shooting like 45% from 3.
Yeah, I don't know that they're going to be that low if they get in as in that large, or as they're. I don't know if they're going to get it. I don't know if they'd be that low in the seedings, because man, they were. I think the AP had them. I never had them in my top 25, but I believe the AP had them top 25 last week. Did they not?
Yeah, but then they lost the game. And
they lost.
They're out.
Yeah,
they lost the game.
There are a lot of dangerous teams. Iowa played Davidson a few years ago. There's a lot of dangerous teams out there. I don't think there's as many bid stealers out there as there have been in past seasons, but I think there's a possibility, because you don't have one or two. You don't have Gonzaga and Baylor dominating things. I don't know that you're going to have the top heaviness which produces 3 of your Final 4 teams being number 1 seeds. I don't see that happening this year.
No. Oh, and if you want to know something about 3 Final 1 seeds, Alabama's being 3 1 seeds from last year's Final 4.
Gonzaga, Baylor, and who?
Houston.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, that's why they're a weird team. Alabama's a weird team because they lose to people they shouldn't lose to, and they beat teams they shouldn't beat.
That's weird. And the final thing I'll say is somebody needs to call Joe Lunardi. I don't know how he still has Iowa as a 7th seed.
You like that, don't you? You like that, don't you?
Listen, I don't mind it. I'm proud for Iowa still being a 7th seed, but for them not to move in any way, shape, or form, I thought they would at least be an 8 or 9 seed. That was one of the worst losses taken this week by a team in that range.
Yeah, and Jerry Palm's got them as a 12 seed. So I don't know what to think. To think. They beat Ohio State tomorrow. They're in as of right now. If the tournament were starting tomorrow, even though they'd have a 5-7 record, they'd be in. That win would set very well the committee. Very well.
Corey, if you could do me a favor, how many teams have beaten Ohio State at Ohio State this year?
0, not 1.
Oh, really?
Not 1.
It's a tall order.
It's a very tall order.
Well, good luck tomorrow, Corey, in your game, and good luck with the rest of the recruiting day.
All right, sir.
Yeah,
Appreciate the time as always.
Hit the red subscribe button to get Corey to 1,000 subscribers.
Yes, thank you so much. We're trying to get to 1,000. We're hovering around 900, so we need some help. So share on social media if you haven't already done so.
Good talking to you.
Appreciate it, sir. Have a great night. And sorry, we kind of segued away from basketball there for a moment. And yes, I'm still working. I'm still on this show, Gary. You've cleaned some heavy snow off your vehicle and made a run back in. I've made a pickup run to Jets. What the heck is Jets? I don't know what Jets is. Let's take our next call. Thank you for calling from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Who's on the line?
Lomansky, Corey.
Lemansky, how are you, sir?
Good. I got some information for you. Your knowledge has piqued my curiosity. There's an article written by Danielle Smith, Smythe. I think it's called Career Trend. And she put out the statistic that the average quarterback coaching salary in the NFL, and this is written last fall, was $200,000. Now that's the average. And Parker makes $1 million, and I was trying to compare Parker's salary to the QB salary and the average NFL salary. And then I'll let you digest that and comment.
Well, okay? So you said the average quarterback's coach salary in the NFL is $200,000.
Correct.
Parker's making around $1 million. Correct.
Yeah, I wish I could remember that for you, but you're really close to what Parker's making. You're really close. I don't have the exact. I'm sorry.
Do you have the average coordinator salary in the league, the NFL?
It's a lot larger than the OC, of course. That's where you start getting a big jump because they're in line for head coaches. So it's a lot larger.
Yeah, I don't really. I maybe Mark Rogers would have a better answer as to why there's such a gap there, but certainly that does make you furrow your brow, and Ken O'Keefe is making $650,000 a year, as a quarterback's coach exclusively. Now there are, just for perspective, there are some other quarterbacks coaches who are making fairly high amounts, but nobody making $650,000. So, yeah, that's mind-boggling. And again, it's got nothing to do with a personal vendetta against Ken O'Keefe. I would love for Ken O'Keefe to succeed here because he has been a big part of this program under Kirk Ferentz, but you're not getting it done, Lemansky. You're not getting it done. I don't know how else to put it. Am I right?
I guess what it's all because of you. You triggered my light bulb in my head because I guess in my mind, this is a state school. So even though the taxpayer doesn't have a lot of say, we got the board of regents, we got an athletic director, we got a head coach. And I got to thinking okay, so Ken, with his years of service, went to NFL and left. And if that's the average NFL salary, I'd love to know what he was making. So I'm guessing he compared the two and asked to come back for money, and he probably had a salary limit in NFL and couldn't make any more than he was making, and he only had so many more years to coach. And I guess my comment is, what's our bang for the buck, Parker, Ken? I guess the money that the Ferentz has made university in his tenure, I can accept that, but I guess I don't know.
Well, isn't
there linkage?
Well, first of all, I don't think I'd have to look back at what Ken coached at Miami. He was not coaching quarterbacks at Miami, for the record.
Thank you.
I believe he was. Let me look that up real quick because I believe he was coaching receivers. I could be wrong. Let me just see if I can find that information here while I got you on the phone. So, according to what I'm seeing, he was coaching receivers. And then in 2016, he was a senior analyst. But from 12 to 15, he was a wide receivers coach. But he did coach quarterbacks at Iowa. So before he left for Miami, he was the OC and quarterbacks coach from 99 to 2011. And I know there were a lot of people that wanted him gone as the OC because the offense wasn't great during the majority of that stretch either, although he was here during the Brad Banks year. My big issue there, Lemansky, is the fact that you have a guy who that's your only job. You are a quarterback's coach, and it's inexplicable to be paying anybody, whether it be Kirk Ferentz or Bobby Bowden. I don't care who your quarterback's coach is. I don't care what position we're talking about. If that position is lower, if you're in the lower fifth of the Big Ten Conference, and I'm talking about all the passing numbers, and I ran through those numbers on my channel here a week ago. If you're basically bottom fifth in every passing category, and you have a quarterback's coach who's making more than anybody else in the country, that is unacceptable.
I think you made the point about trying to remember the point you make, and then I'm having a lapse. But it's kind of interesting when you look at the. I just remembered. If you look at the OC pay in the Big Ten Conference, Michigan OC last year. I don't know if he's still with Michigan now in 2022, but Michigan's quarterbacks coach pay, as listed with Ken's, is fairly close. And then the other Big Ten team I saw was Nebraska, a lot lower. Then it all drops off. So if you want to look at competition, the Big Ten and quarterbacks pay, there's a lot of quarterbacks paying less in the Big Ten with better performance. I thought that was an interesting stat you'd like to mull over too.
Yeah, and again, I weighed those out last week as far as performance. The only programs you could argue that were more deficient at that position last year would be Northwestern. It would be Indiana, who, of course, Lemansky. They lost Penix, they lost Tuttle at one point. They were sifting through quarterbacks much of last year. So Northwestern, Indiana, and then Rutgers. Those are the only teams you could say were consistently finished below Iowa in most passing categories. For the most part, Petrus ranked 10th or 11th in almost every passing category. So yeah, I mean, like Nebraska, we Iowa fans like to make fun of Nebraska, and I understand that. But Nebraska's quarterback play has been much better than Iowa's, and it's not even close. It's not even close. You can talk about Adrian Martinez making mistakes and whatnot. Quarterback play has been better there, and I predict it will be better in 2022 because they have two transfers coming in, one of which was the starter at Texas. It's unbelievable. It's just unbelievable. And, Michigan just recruited J.J. McCarthy, who is, I know Michigan fans perceive him as the future. Now we'll see if that pans out or not. It's unbelievable. I just, and again, I've said it a million times. People get tired of me saying this as well. I like Ken O'Keefe. Got nothing against him personally, but the numbers you just gave me are proof that it's just ridiculous.
You and Mark Rogers had a conversation about Ohio State's moves to improve regarding coaching and coaching moves, and I heard that. And it's kind of interesting. Again, I like to look at the competition, the Big Ten, what's going on, and be interesting to watch the Northwestern program's head coach as they go forward. Just think he's a really talented coach falling on hard times. But look what they did to Jim Harbaugh at Michigan last year and slashed his salary. And I thought it was a little extreme. But I guess if you look at your competition for performance, look what your competition did to Jim Harbaugh last year based on performance. I mean, I guess I'll end with that is I always like to look at our competition and then what do you want to call it? Grade yourself if you're in the business of winning and compare and contrast. I think that's fair.
Well, it's a problem though, Lemansky, and you know this because when you have a conflict of interest, and that's what it is when you have your son as a coach or when you have your buddy as your quarterback's coach, there's a conflict of interest. It makes it harder to do your job properly because part of your job as Kirk Ferentz, as the head coach of this program, is to make the tough decisions of retaining or releasing a coach of his or her duties when they're not performing up to standards. So even though I agree with you, you have to reflect and just like Michigan and Ohio State and all the marquee programs do on a regular basis, you have to be willing to do that. But it's harder because you put yourself in a position where you have conflicts of interest.
And of course, the most interesting conflict of interest is Clint Kubiak, who got a job with the Vikings because his dad used to be an OC. And then Zimmer, whose son was on the staff for the Minnesota Vikings. And we all know what happened to this whole deal last year. So I'll end with that and let you comment and continue with the show.
All right, sir. Have a great night. Appreciate the call.
You bet.
And yeah, and for the record, we keep bringing up Jim Harbaugh. If he ends up going to Minnesota, which it sounds like that's happening, it sounds like, no loyalty. I mean, the guy won one game against Ohio State, made the playoff one time, got blasted by Georgia, and he's out. He was already. I don't get the move. I don't understand what's so appealing about going to Minnesota to coach why he wants out, I'd love for somebody to explain it to me. Would love for somebody to explain it to me. Gary, it's a basketball question, but he says, is Michigan State a top 7 team in your opinion? Their loss to Illinois hurt them, Gary. I don't have them right now. I'm not projecting forward. My top 25 that actually makes sense is not based upon what I believe to be true, who I believe the best teams are. It's based on resume. And right now, Michigan State is not in my top 7. They lost to an Illinois team that was struggling against, the likes of, they were struggling mainly because of injuries. Curbelo and Coburn were both out for that game against Michigan State, and yet Illinois won that game. So, but anyways, no, I think they have the potential. They don't have the firepower that past Izzo teams have had, but they got the potential to be a top 10 team, and I think a top 3 seed, not overall, but a 1, 2, or 3 seed in the tournament. Seth, Ken O'Keefe was the offensive coordinator before Brian was hired on, of course, before Greg Davis. Not saying he's worth $500K, but I can guarantee you he has a big hand in what offenses and schemes Iowa is running. That may be, Seth, and that's that's conjecture. That might be true, but that doesn't help his cause, does it? I mean, that doesn't help his cause at all. You can say, well, that's why he's making so much money. The offense is still really bad, so certainly that doesn't help his cause. Not in my book, because the offense is not good. All right. Appreciate everybody hanging out here for a couple hours on this Wednesday. I want to remind everybody, tomorrow night, we'll be right here with Coach Gary Close, former Iowa assistant Gary Close, for Iowa-Ohio State postgame, 7 p.m. for the game on FS1, 9 p.m. 9 p.m. For our show with Coach Close. And a reminder, if you've not already done so, please subscribe to our channel. We have a post-game show after every Iowa men's basketball game. And we're not, it's totally free. We're not asking you to pay anything. All you got to do is hit the little subscribe button. It helps immensely. And once we get to 1,000 subscribers, it helps us in the algorithm, helps us become more relevant. And we're finally able to bring in a little bit of monetization from YouTube. Of course, YouTube takes a lot of it. They're taking it all right now. Before you get to 1,000 subscribers, you're making nothing. So please subscribe, tell others about our show, about our channel. If you have multiple YouTube accounts, sign them all up. And certainly you can, even if you need to turn notifications off, you can do that. But it certainly helps us if you're subscribed to the show. And again, to wrap things up on today's activity, Iowa signing one scholarship player, I should say, to its 2022 class to finish off the at least high school commits and signees. Of course, Iowa's still active in the portal. Hopefully they can land Hunter Norris. That'd be a huge development. Deshaun Lee, though, signing with Iowa, kid from Belleville, Michigan, 5'11", 175, cornerback, class of 22, Detroit native. If you missed our interview with Deshaun, we had him on my podcast yesterday. So check out that video, week 188 of Bradis Branded Thoughts, Deshaun Lee exclusive interview. We posted it yesterday right here to this channel. He is a very, very well-spoken, very, very kind young man, high character, just like every recruit we've spoken with. So very, very much a pleasure to be able to speak with Deshaun this week, and congratulations to him and his family. And Iowa finishes off with 18 scholarship players in the class of 22, including the big names: Aaron Graves, Xavier Wampa, TJ Hall, Brian Allen Jr., Caden Crawford, and of course Deshaun Lee, along with a number of other recruits as well. And of course, Iowa signing the 2 receivers as walk-ons out of Wisconsin today as well. So once again, folks, appreciate everybody being with us today. We'll be back tomorrow for Iowa post-game with Coach Gary Close. So subscribe, and we'll be with you about 9 p.m. following the conclusion of Iowa-Ohio State. We'll be with you at 9 p.m. Central Time right here from the Hawkeye of the Storm on YouTube. We hope you have a great night.